On Coast, we're joined by Shane Hale. We knew him as Shane back in the 60s, early 70s, was it, Shane, back then, the big
The
dude?
60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, we're still going flat out.
Yeah, the amazing thing is you are still going, but let's go back to your beginnings. Where did it all begin, your music career for you?
Oh, well, way back, look, I started out as a duo with my brother, and we called ourselves Shane and Steve. And we used to click our fingers and do little Everly Brother movements and all that sort of stuff, you know, and then, of course, the group thing started, the Liverpool sound and all that sort of thing. So we went out there and just did the Dave Clark 5 sort of material and stuff like that. Of course, then I was spotted by Eldred Stebbing. We were performing on a talent quest, and he offered me the job with his band at the time called the Australian Pleasers. It's Pleasers with a Z.
Yes.
Who were doing very well at the time and causing all sorts of upsets with long hair and rolling on the floor and crazy stunts. And I decided, I looked at my brother and said, I can't leave you in the lurch. And he said, no, I've got a job for your brother as well. So he gave my brother Steve a job with a group called the Layabouts. And we were both performing at the Galaxy down here in Custom Street in Auckland. It was actually the Shirley at the time I first went there, and we changed over, made it the Galaxy. But we started, both of us resident with each band. We do half an hour, then the other band would do half an hour. So that's really how it all started. And of course, I jumped in at the deep end, had to learn my trade really quickly with the band because I hadn't had a great deal of experience.
Did you get singing lessons back then? Were there singing lessons?
I think singing along with our favourite 45s was the singing lessons.
Yeah, probably would have been too, wouldn't it?
And no, I've really never taken any singing lessons. And people probably might say, yeah, you need some. But no singing lessons or anything else. Just jumped in and started learning a few chords on the guitar and... like everybody else, sitting in their bedroom and practicing.
And the music was much simpler then, wasn't it?
Simpler, yes, it was. But it's more live. Now everything's is produced, I'd say, much more overproduced than it was in those days. Producers were just a new thing, really. It was someone overseeing the recording of a live take in those days, and the band just got a groove, and it was great. You know, you did it in one take sometimes.
So after the Pleasers, what happened then?
Well, the Pleasers went on for 3 years, and then, of course, it split up in 1967, 68, and I formed a band called Shane. And there was another radio station called 1480 Hauraki, and they run the club down in Auckland City called 1480 Village. And I became resident there with my group called Shane. And we backed a lot of other artists at that stage, and Come On was looking for a new star in 1968. After Lee Grant had gone off to England, they had no frontman for the show, so they were auditioning people and bringing them down to where we were playing at the 1480 Village, and my band was backing them. And Phil Warren and Kevin Moore, the producer of the show, Come On, 68, saw me performing there as well, and instead of looking at the other guys, they turned around and said, look, do you want the gig? And I said, I couldn't leave the band, man. So obviously a fool that I was, and I said, no, I couldn't leave the band, I couldn't do that. So they all carried on auditioning other people. A couple of days later, I came down and the band were auditioning another singer, and I said, hey, I got there early. And they said, you're not supposed to be here yet. And I said, no, obviously. I went straight down the phone box, called up Phil Warren and said, that audition you asked me about, is it still on? He said, yeah, tonight at TVNZ Studios. So I went down to the studios and that evening and performed in front of the cameras and things. And Kevin Moore gave me a bit of a pep talk, explaining to me how hard and tough it's going to be. He wants a certain level of professionalism. And I said, I'm in for it. I'll be all right. Next morning, I got a phone call saying, congratulations, you're the new star of Come On 68.
Wow. And then you would have
been
been what?
How it happened. You know.
You would have been, about 20 years old then?
I was 21, I think. 21, yeah, just 21.
So that was the turning point in a way for you. It led to things like the Golden Disc Award?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Come On was huge at the time. And you had the audience every Saturday night. Teenage audience.
Was that live TV?
It was live. It went out live, but we mimed the songs.
All the secrets are coming out now.
You mimed, and some of that wasn't too good either. And you had these new songs every week to learn, you know.
Yes.
And, you'd have to know them off pat by the time the show went out live. It was broadcast live, but we actually were miming to the song.
With all the go-go dances and the
Yeah, the
psychedelic
go-go
things
girls
going
and
around.
things, and all sorts of funny things happened in those situations going out live. I can remember that John Lennon song, and he sings, "Christ, you know it ain't easy."
Yeah, Ballad of John and Yoko.
Yeah, and we weren't allowed to say Christ on TV.
No.
So I had to leave that part out and just, "You know it ain't easy." And of course, I was on the tape, but when I'd been doing it live with the Christ in when I was out on gigs. And it was just habit, and I went, "Christ," and I'd suddenly thought, "I've just said Christ." I put my hand over my mouth. And of course, I'm miming a track, and the track's still playing, and it's going out live. Apparently, the whole place burst into fits of laughter, and
You could just about write a book on those come on days, really,
there's
couldn't
some
you?
incredible stories.
With the people involved, Suzanne and Ray Wolf.
Yeah, eggs in go-go boots.
Oh.
The poor little girls, they'd run out there, change their boots, and we'd all put eggs in their boots and things. And they didn't had such quick changes. Got eggs in our boots, but too late. Quick, and then we dancing away with eggs.
Let's talk
Scrambled
about
eggs.
that fantastic hit of yours called St. Paul. Was that sort of life-changing for you?
Certainly was, yeah. I mean, that's when it really went to up a few notches. When we recorded it, it was a very exciting time too, because we were looking for something for the big hit.
Where did that song come from?
It was a guy called Terry Knight in the States, who's deceased now. His son-in-law shot him. He had a block of apartments in Chicago, and he got shot by his son-in-law after he'd attacked his Terry Knight's daughter.
Oh dear.
So Terry stepped in to stop it, and he turned around and shot him. But apart from that, he went to London, Terry Knight, to see the Beatles, and he went to was it Apple Records,
Yes.
and he sat there for about a week and a half trying to get recognised, because they were looking for new artists, Apple and the Beatles, but he never got to see any of them, and he was quite despondent when he left, and he went back to America on the plane, and he had his guitar with him on the plane, and he sat down looking out at the sky. I looked into the sky, and that's how he started writing the song.
Yeah.
And it was all about being back in London, trying to see the Beatles, and he wrote the song about the Beatles, Paul McCartney.
And so you basically had the rights to record
Well,
it?
he sent a demo out all over the place, and we got a demo of it, just him and his guitar, and we loved it. And Peter Dawkins, my producer at the time for EMI, a lot of artists, he was really excited, and he had lots of ideas for it, and we sat round. By the time we finished recording it, just on a 4-track studio at that time, we were just shaking with anticipation and excitement, because we really thought we had something here. It was so ahead of anything that had been done in New Zealand at the time. So we were very excited, and it obviously paid off, and it turned out to be #1 for 6 weeks, which is life-changing. You can't go anywhere after that.
No, and I mean, we still play it to this day on Coast, and people
And
still
I'm
remember
very
it.
lucky to have had that song. I mean,
Yeah.
it's with me wherever I go. If I don't sing that song, I'm in strife.
And you won the Loxine Golden Disc Award with that song as well, didn't you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we won that, and that was a long, hard slog too. In those days, I was on the road for 3 months promoting that song, down in Dunedin, South Island, away from home, and you were doing 3 gigs a day, and interviews, and TV, and all that sort of thing. And it never stopped. I mean, I think my weight was down to about 8 stone. I was like, I had lead shoes on to keep me down on the ground. I was just
It would have
float
been
away.
the hardest thing then would have been to follow it up with something, another song, and I think Lady Samantha was the one, wasn't it?
Lady Samantha came along. That was Elton John and Bernie Taupin's first song that they'd written. And a demo of that came through, and Germany were interested by then, because St. Paul was going quite well in Germany, and Europe were interested, but we had lots of copyright problems in Europe, in England, northern songs with EMI, etc. So we're looking for another song. Lady Samantha came along, and I remember we got the guitarist just from the storeroom in EMI, where the studios were pretty adjacent to the old storeroom where they kept the records. And he worked in there, and we got him into the studio and said, "We want you to play this." And he played it absolutely brilliantly.
Wow.
And I'm trying to think of his name, and it escapes me at the moment.
You tried touring the UK, you tried going to Europe. Did that work?
Yeah, I went there, and I learnt a lot, of course. And I think I was a little bit disappointed that St. Paul, I toured Europe and Germany with Christie and various other groups, Andy Kim, people that you play on the air still. And they were great times for me, and I was doing TV shows and running around Europe. But then I went back to and established myself in London, and I got a band together, And I came back here for 6 months, would work here and then do 6 months in UK, like the eternal summer, just through the summer seasons.
Was it lucrative? Was it?
Not in England or anything, no, but it was lucrative here. I was doing very well at the time, and financially it was good, and that kept me going. I could live on that money in England for 6 months and carry on working at my art over there.
Sure.
But I got in a couple of bands over there. Kilohertz was one of them. Heavy metal type band. I worked in another band called Midnight Wolf, which was more of a Stonesy band, and we wrote all the songs. I did a lot of songwriting, and Matt, we were doing very well. But it's breaking that record side of things, getting the record out there,
getting the break,
getting that break,
like St. Paul in New Zealand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in the end, in the 80s, I decided to come back and settle in New Zealand again, and which I've done, and I've been here ever since. Very, very happy.
And so you're still entertaining to this very day?
Yes, very much so. And I was working, like I say, I was telling you earlier that I was working in Hamilton last Friday night at the Novotel ballroom with a 60s night for a convention, and everyone turned up in the gear and the hippie gear and everything. It was a great night. Fantastic. And there was Ray Wolf, another face from the 60s, working 100 yards away from me at Sky City. And we bump into each other around the countryside. It's mostly 60s artists that I see that are doing all this sort of work still. I think when we go, I'm not sure what's going to be happening because there's still a huge nostalgia trip.
Oh, absolutely. I hear there's a wee rumour going around that the Pleasers might be getting back together as well.
Very true, and I've even spoken to them this morning in Australia, and it's December. We're doing a one-off, one night only, with a great 60s band from Britain, which I'm not allowed to say any more about it this time.
Your lips are sealed.
But the Pleasers are reuniting and being the support act for that. Now that's going to be a real blast. 1965 to here we are, 2012, and we're back on stage together. Fortunately, we're all still here.
Shane, it's great of you to have joined us this morning, and thanks for coming in.
Brilliant. I love to hear.